lecturer. She's also a researcher and an author. Her passion lies in organizational leadership and organizational change, and equally in self-leadership and self-transformation. So let's give the ladies a very warm welcome, and I'd like to start off the session by asking this question. Tell me, ladies, what inspired you to speak on this topic? Something beautiful happens when you choose courage. Dora, would you like to speak first?
Thank you, Suman, and thank you for that introduction. I also want to thank everyone who's come here to be part of this session today. 2 weeks ago, if you asked me this question, probably my response to you would have been different because this topic was decided, I think, at least a month and a half ago. And since then, the world has changed. And to put it in context with what's going on in the world today, I'm a little bit, it's very close to my heart, and I'm also wondering that whether I am adequate enough, to be talking about it today. In between, I might just get choked, just pardon me for that. So what inspired me? Some months ago, I was listening to this TED Talk, and I have this leader in the world of psychology who I follow. And she was talking about how people come to her and they would, tell her that, look, I don't want to go through strong and deep emotions. I don't want to try this out at work because who knows, I may not do it well. I might just be disappointed. I don't want to be disappointed. I don't want to be stressed. And then her response to them was like, okay, I hear you. I understand what you're going through. But then you have a dead person's goals, because it's only a dead person who doesn't have feelings and emotions, and they don't get stressed. It doesn't matter to them. So when I heard that, it just kind of like, oh my gosh, that's what I wanted to have. I mean, many, many years ago in my corporate world, for those who know me, yes, I come from the corporate world. I mean, Suman has also read that out, in my bio. And those who know me also, they know me as somebody who's so successful in the corporate environment. I have only great accomplishments, great achievements. I had a successful career. But then there was a tiny part of my corporate life where it was not all good. It was dark, where I went through a lot of emotional challenges, pretty deep, pretty dark, that could have led me somewhere else, and I wouldn't have been here if at that moment I had not met those challenges head on and made a choice. And today, as you asked me, what inspired me? For me, the word choosing is very important. So yeah, that's where the inspiration come from. I don't want to talk much right now. I mean, I want to give the opportunity to Claire. So yeah, more in a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora. Claire, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us here. It's quite exciting to have the opportunity to share and to, just get to also intertwine our perspectives. Now, what inspired me to speak on this topic? As ladies, Diana Murray Child quotes, as a woman, you will have a full cycle. And within her is the power to create, to nurture, and to transform. And so as a woman, we have all these seasons that are happening to us. Some are wonderful seasons, some are difficult seasons. And so the inspiration for me to come is really to talk to someone who at some point has, is, or will go through a situation that may require them to have some, redirection of their life's choices. But in particular, much as I've had, corporate experience and vast experience in different other sectors, I am particularly very passionate when it comes to the family setup and more so loved ones. And I'm reaching out to someone who, they've gotten to a space where they'll have to relook, or they've had to relook at their personal life's choices because they've been impacted by a loved one's, challenge, and they could not just ignore it. And so it meant that it was going to impact them as individuals. So much happens right there. So at some point, you're caught up between, you're trying to nurture, you're trying to transform, you're trying to create, it's all intertwined, this chaos, and you're lost. And yet you need to be the anchor. So that is really what I will be talking about today. And I will be sharing my story of when I have chosen, or I'm still choosing, courage. And oh, wow, beautiful things are happening. Thank you so much.
Wow. So you're going to hear two sides of the story, the corporate version as well as the personal version. So Dora, let's get on with you. Tell me a little bit more about your encounter with choosing courage.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Suman. Yeah, and if any one of you, have gone through what I'm going to share today, it's nothing unique, I think, at some point, whether you're in corporate or you are in the public sector, wherever you work, I think it's the same. Sometimes we would go through some of the emotions that I'm going to share now. And if you have experienced that, encountered that, just write on the chat, whether you are resonating with what I am sharing. And fortunately or unfortunately, whatever I encountered at that time was with my lady boss. So let me take a step back first. So before I came to Singapore, I had a very successful career in another country. And just for confidentiality's sake, I'm not going to name the name of the companies that I work for. Very high profile role. And it was a fantastic job that I had. And I was rather maybe complacent at some point because I was having a very good time. And meanwhile, I got headhunted down to come to Singapore for this, again, the Fortune 500 company. And I was so proud. And I said, okay, I'm going to grab this opportunity. I came to Singapore and within 1 month joining into this company, I could feel that this is not looking good for me. So from day one, I could feel that I was just being belittled. I don't know if that's the word like that. Yeah, I was made to feel very little. The role that I was supposed to have was not given to me. I was like going back to just writing press releases, whereas I have done working with the government agencies where I was before. And then it was not just that, it was like, there's no inclusiveness. I was just left alone, and that who are you? And then I was just made to feel that whatever that I was doing, because I come from the communications background, it involves a lot of writing, and everything was like rubbish, and it was just not being accepted, whatever that I would produce. And the boss that hired me, who was a male boss, within 2 months of me joining, he had to leave. He had to go back to the US. And so this lady boss was my interim boss. So that's when the problem started. And in her eyes, or in her opinion, I was just not good. And so therefore I got a lot of psychological abuse, and sometimes it's words as well. Sometimes it's actions, like literally throwing the paper in front of me. I had never experienced and encountered in my entire career. I still have my bosses as my mentors and as my friends today, or my family friends. The children, I feel them, they are like my children. That kind of relationship I have. And here, a new place entirely, 2 months into Singapore. I know nothing about Singapore. I have no godfather in the organization. I had no friends in this country. And I was being made to feel like I was just a garbage. Whatever I write was a garbage. Whatever I say was not good enough. So I went through hell at that moment. It was the darkest moment. And it was one day I realized that I was living in a very beautiful place, almost like a princess, but I was not happy. And suddenly I saw that the mails were piling up. I was not opening my mails. They were coming and I knew exactly each envelope, what was inside those envelopes, but I was not looking at them. And it started piling up. And I paused at that moment. I said, what's going on? Why am I not looking at this this mails? What's going on here with me? Why I'm feeling like this? I was barely sleeping at night. I was so stressed. I lost weight. And I was just telling myself that, my goodness, I never knew that I'm so stupid. I got no brains. I cannot write. What is this? And then one fine day I sat and I said, hang on, is this who I am really? And I'm suddenly getting scared. I'm afraid. I'm angry. I don't even know whether it was anger, but I was really afraid. I was afraid of losing my job because I don't have anyone here. If I lose my job, then I just have to go back. And if I go back to my country, that means I have failed. So there was this fear for failure, fear for not being able to go do my job and how others are going to look at me. So a lot of things going on. And then I said, but hey, that's not me. I know how to write. I have climbed up the corporate ladder and I've come up to this level. And no, I don't think that's me. I know I'm getting afraid now. I'm afraid of failure right now, but I don't think I am a failure. And I don't think I am, that I'm not good, because at that moment it was all like, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm just a garbage because, my boss was making me feel so. So I just thought that, what do I do now? I am afraid to lose my job. I cannot just leave my job. So that's the biggest thing in that whole episode. Do I leave my job? Do I stay in my job and feel miserable, or do I leave? If I leave, I have nothing. My economy was not good at that moment, so I could barely survive for a few months. And if I go back, it's such a shame for me. I was like, yeah, I was facing shame. And then I decided, what do I do? Who do I tell to? I have only one person as a friend who in Singapore at that time. So I was telling him and his wife. And finally, I got the guts to tell my sister. And then I thought that, okay, I need to do something about it, because it was getting worse and worse every day. And one fine day, I just told myself, I'm going to leave. That very decision that I made me so much lighter when I took that decision. I just told myself, no matter what it is, I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to work on my resume, send it out to the headhunters and see what happens. And so what, even if I fail, and even if I don't get a job, I'm just going to go back. I already have a house. I'm paying a mortgage for my house in my country. So I at least have a roof over my head, and I don't need to go through this to make me feel so bad, because this is not working for me. So I had to take a lot of courage at that moment to even think, to consider of leaving or looking for another job, because I have not established myself in this country at that time. I don't know any headhunters. I don't know anybody at all in the industry to start with. So, but lo and behold, and I believed in my faith. I reached out to my friends in the church and in the cell group. They prayed for me, they prayed with me. And lo and behold, after I brushed out my resume and sent it out, within one day, I got a response from the headhunter. Within 1 week, I got another job, and the rest is a history. That new job then just gave me a lot of exposure in the European market. And I just started, the beauty part started, happening again there. And I left the job and started another job in another company. And that's all a history. And I'm here today because I took that decision. Otherwise, I don't know what would have happened to me, because probably I would have gone through depression and not being able to move, just like I was not looking at my mails. I couldn't even reach out to my mails because I had no energy. So yeah, long story short, Soman. So that's where I encountered choosing courage. I had to drop all my fears, not drop actually, I had to face my fears, face the fear for failing, fears for shame. I had to face it head on.
Wow, it makes me feel really proud of you, Dora, to know this story. And yeah, we're going to unpack it more, but I thought, shall we just invite Claire to also share with us her encounter? You know, one thing that struck me as you spoke was it's really funny how women don't support women, right? Because yours was a lady boss, and I've heard horror stories along those lines. But yes, Claire, over to you. Let's hear your encounter.
Wow, Dora's story is so inspiring, and I mean, she cut it. You know, I'm still trying to settle myself to talk about my story, but wow, Dora, I'm so proud of you. I'm really proud of you. So, what's my story? For me, it's in respects to a loved one. So, I am a high flying corporate person at some point, and having this grand role. And I'd also graduated with my doctorate. So life was really good. I mean, I was getting the big salary, and at the same time, I had headhunters who were quite after me, to the point I actually had letters of offer. You know, when favor comes, I was surrounded with a lot of favor. Yeah, an interesting way to start a story. And as well, even for my partner, the same thing was happening and an opportunity came. Now, the opportunity required us to relocate. And yeah, as I've mentioned, there were 2 letters of offer. But at the background of it all, when I was in this corporate role, I was working 15 hours a day. And I had my little one who was 2 years old. The interesting part about my 2-year-old is she had never quite called me mom. And she had never even gotten to the place where she would express her needs verbally. And I just kept telling myself, she will catch on, you know, she's behind in her milestones. And in fact, there were some milestones that she was quite behind on, like walking, like, you know, feeding, you know. And I just kept telling myself, don't compare children. In fact, that was my mantra, don't compare children. Mine will catch on. And I didn't quite have enough time with her because I would leave early and come quite late at night. And so I really didn't see her. However, now with the move that happened, of the 2 jobs that I'd been offered, one was working remotely. And so since the move was happening, I then opted to take the remote opportunity. And so I started working from home. So what did this mean? It meant that I was working, but I was seeing my child. And believe you me, I started to see my child. And when a mother knows, she knows. I noticed she was not reaching her milestones as she was expected. And whether I kept telling myself that narrative that she was going to catch on, she wasn't. So I started reaching out to family, to friends. And of course, the perfect explanation is always take the child to school and she will learn from her peers. So in fact, we made a decision to relocate back to an environment where we'd actually get her good schooling. And equipped with denial and hope, we took her to school. And that's when the tough journey began. My child was miserable. Going to school was a nightmare. And even worse, she'd come back home soiled you know, despite a change of clothes. And I'm telling you, we'd always get a reasonable explanation of why she was not okay. You know, there was a very well detailed explanation such that even you, who at the back of your mind, you're clear something is amiss, but somehow you keep quietening that voice until one day my fears were confirmed, because I went to school earlier to collect her, to pick her, and I saw her. I went to the field, you know, I'm just hanging around. It's a little bit early, so I'm just waiting to see for the children to clear up and then I can pick her. And I decided, let me take a walk and go to the field. And I was just at the, you know, the beginning of the field. And then I look at the end of the field and I see somebody on the sandpit. And then she sees me, so she stands up. She's by herself. The person who was minding her was like 10 or so meters away. I didn't want an explanation anymore. I knew she was being put away because they didn't understand her. And so she was a distraction to what was happening. But I can't blame them for putting her away because they didn't understand her. Even I didn't understand her, because if I did understand her, she would not have been there. 3 days later, we're walking out of a pediatric neurodevelopmental specialist, and we had gotten the diagnosis. She had ASD, that is autism spectrum disorder. And well, equipped with the usual denial, we had been supplied with, options of how we can, support her. We can start the journey of helping her through. And so walking out of there with the confidence that in 3 months she'd be fine. Ignorance is bliss. And I thank God in part that we were in the COVID season, because all the plans that we had made would have really taken us a different route. So instead, COVID season, we are not getting the specialist. And so I decided that I was going to be the person who was going to give us speech therapy and occupational therapy. And I failed miserably. But there's something that happened. It's in that failure that I realized I didn't need to fix her. She didn't need any form of fixing. What she needed the most was my love. She needed acceptance. This is who she is. I needed to accept her, and I needed to love her with everything I have. And so as the COVID season wore off and we were able to, bring a therapist and an occupational therapist, I sought somebody who told me, shared her story about her child who's 23 years old now and in a group home. And she told me of her journey, and she told me something. She tried all methodologies, but the most important lesson she ever learned was no one else could ever love your child the way you do. And for me, that hit home so hard, because I realized no one else is ever gonna love her like I do. And that changed the whole dynamic, because I then began to look at every mitigation that I had in mind through the sieve of love. And the first one was my career. Of course, I had done this doctorate to the big dream. I had pursued so many other certifications with the dream of, being at the top. But it meant that the money would come in, but I would not be there. I'd not be there to supervise her therapies. I'd not be there to supervise her homeschooling. And so that was one of the hardest decisions that I ever had to make. But the worst of it all is it impacts not just you and your child, but even the family, because if you're taking a back in relation to your finances, it's going to affect your relationships. But this was the point where I chose her. I chose her. And so I redefined my working from home, the point where I needed to be available. I needed to be available for her therapies. I needed to be available for her schooling. I needed to be intentional about how she was learning. She was nonverbal, remember? So you can't teach and then inquire directly from her. We had to come up with a very different methodology for teaching her. And then something happened in that season also, due to the grief I was trying to process, the heartbreak, the career loss, and also, the dream of watching your child run, in sports and winning. I think we all believe that our children are sports people, that always be winning, or they are very gifted. And I had to let go of all those dreams. I even had to let go of small dream like going to the supermarket, just whatever time, however time, whatever time, things had to change. And more so, I grieved my career as well. So I was in that grieving space, and I got to coach masters, and there was a catharsis that happened during that whole process. Even my own other emotional struggles that were taking place, they started being sorted. And I was like, first of all, I was home, and then something else happened. I became so good at developing the IEPs, the individualized education program for my child. And then people would ask, how do you do that? I started helping people with that. And then as the coach, as I got this coaching training, I then got a chance to really talk to people who are also struggling, who were caught up, they were not being able to navigate it through. And yeah, they were able to have coaching sessions and a different mindset in relation to the new journey with their children, or even sometimes it's even parents. A parent has been diagnosed and needs a lot of care, and I've had such situations. So I started coaching about that, but I'm still taking care of my baby. And you want to know the most amazing reward for me is in 7 months, my daughter, who was nonverbal, she started talking. And she's able to tell me how she's feeling. She's able to express her needs. Give me milk. I want the green one. And the other beautiful thing is she caught on academically to her peers. And yet she was being nonverbal, but we found a way to work with her. She would use stickers to answer, but we would not have been able to achieve that if she was one amongst many. But because we individualized her learning, the world blossomed. And there are other kids who I can tell you they're blossoming. In fact, there's someone attending the session today when I talked to her about individualized education program. The child started developing, and we had numerous coaching sessions, and there's been a lot of transformation. So I would never, ever have known how to do this in the corporate world. But now, yeah, it's a new world. It's a new world when I just got the courage to let go of my dream and let what was happening come. A new world came for me. So thank you so much. I hope I didn't take too much time.
No, Claire, this is really big to have the courage to let go of your dream for bigger things. This is really big. I'm going to go back to Dora because I know I love both your stories, and I think everyone in the audience is now thinking, how do we really, get to this point where we can choose courage. So Dora, how do we unpack your story and what are some of the learnings? How do you do it? How do you get to a point where you can actually choose courage?
Thank you so much. And wow, Claire, I haven't heard the whole story, but thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Let me take a deep breath in first. Learnings. For me, my biggest learnings, I'm going to say a few things here in this section. But one of the learnings for me is that, in this world, as we travel through our lives, for humans like us, there is very few ways of knowing which course to take or what lies ahead of us. If we don't have a lighthouse to, keep us away from those rocky relationships, or we don't have a lookouts on or a bow or a radar in the tower to tell us there's a big iceberg there and, there's some threats out there. That's going to sink our career plans. We don't have such indications. But my learning from my experience was that instead we have our emotions. We have the sensations like fear, anxiety, joy, exhilaration. We can name, we can call out all those emotions. It's a neurochemical, system that has evolved to help us navigate through life's complex currents and situations. So our emotions are data. So that was one of the key things that I picked up from my own experience. But we could have two different kinds of reactions to those emotions. One could be the rigid reactions, or we could call it emotional rigidity. And that could come because, we have this old story, like for whatever that was going through at that moment, the story that was the reel that was playing in my head was, you're not good enough. You are stupid. You're a garbage. You are a failure. Those were the reels that was playing in my head, that I'm a loser. I'm not smart. I'm not cut off for this. So those are very, very rigid reactions. But then, and I'm not the psychologist, I'm not the researcher, I'm just sharing now from my, learnings along the way, because I got very curious about it. It says that there's a growing body of research. It shows that, and each one of you must have experienced that emotional rigidity, when we are so hard with our emotions, getting hooked by our thoughts, getting hooked by our feelings and behaviors that don't serve us, then it is associated with psychological illness, including depression and anxiety. Yeah, we know that. But meanwhile, the good news is there is emotional agility. When we are agile with our emotions, when we hear the word agility, we think of the word flexibility, right? So when we are flexible with our thoughts, with our feelings, then we are able to respond, optimally to whatever that we are going through, in our everyday situations, which is kind of key to our well-being. And in my case, I was losing weight and I was close to getting one of those illness, and so it's key not only to well-being but also to our success, because for my career it was so important at that moment that I get back into where I was before.
Dora, you said emotional agility. Can you say more? Like, help us understand what that is about, so that we can begin to be more agile with our emotions, perhaps.
Thank you for that question. For those who know me, I'm so much into movement, and I call my group of practitioners as a mindfulness movement. And so that's agility is very much close to my heart as well, So emotional agility, and this is like a definition, or again, what I've learned, it's a process, that will allow us to be in the moment. In the moment, we are maintaining, or we are changing our behaviors so that we can live in a way that is in alignment to our intentions, and in alignment to our values. So the process is not about ignoring our difficult emotions. So in my case, again, I'm not going to go back to those, those fears and fear of failure and all of that. It's not about ignoring them, but it's about holding those emotions, meeting them head on, and losing those thoughts loosely, and facing them courageously, face them with courage, with compassion, and then we move past them so that we can get to those big plans, big things to happen in our lives. So you must be wondering that, how do we get there? What is that, process? So I'm just going to share 4 things in terms of the process of gaining emotional agility. It unfolds in 4 essential movements. Again, remember, movements, yeah? So the first one is about showing up. I'm not doing a PowerPoint presentation. This is supposed to be like an informal fireside chat. So if you want to just note down, you can note down. So the first movement is showing up. And I'm just going to share Woody Allen, what he said once. And he said that 80% of the success is simply showing up. And I can vouch for that with my own little experience with my little puppy. For those who know me, you know that I have a puppy. So I took her for obedience training, and she is not an obedient puppy at all when she was 6 months. And but anyway, it was like 10 sessions that I had to do, and on the 10th day there's a test. She has to pass that test to get a certificate. But on the 9th session, there was a mock session, and in that session, oh my goodness, there was one particular dog, was just doing so well. And then the trainer said, this is going to be like the number 1, and she can be in the shows as well. My puppy was nowhere there. She was like somewhere in between. On the actual day of the test, I don't know what happened. That dog, that was doing extremely well, didn't show up. And my puppy, who was nowhere close to being on the top 5 or whatever, was one of the top 3, just because she showed up. She was able to be there, and then she performed somehow, and she was in the top 3. So in terms of, if you bring that in the context of emotional agility, it's showing up would mean facing into your thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors willingly, with curiosity and with kindness. I was not being kind to myself at that moment. I was not showing up. I was just, putting myself in the rut at that moment. So there could be some thoughts that are valid. Yeah, some of my thoughts were valid, but those thoughts were not me. They could be appropriate, but they were not me. So in either case, whether they're like old thoughts, playing in me, old reels playing in me, or they were appropriate or not, whether they are accurate reflections or not, there were or harmful distortions, those thoughts and emotions are part of who we are, and we can learn with them and move on. So that is about showing up. The next one is stepping out. How one of the essentials of movement for emotional agility. So after you have faced your thoughts and emotions, is detaching from it. You observe them to see them for what they are. So just saying that, okay, those are just my thoughts, that those are just emotions. And by doing that, we are applying the approach described by Viktor Frankl about this open, non-judgmental space between our feelings and how we respond to them. Yeah. So Viktor Frankl, those who follow his book, or those who read his book will know that he was a psychiatrist who survived a Nazi death camp. And he went on then later to write a book called Man's Search for Meaning on Leading More Meaningful Life, in which human potential can be fulfilled. So that's the book that he had written. So the key thing in his book, or in his expression, is that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And we say that even in mindfulness, when you take a deep breath in and you hold there, that's that space. That's when you're giving your body the rest that is needed. Your vagus nerves, your nervous system, you're giving your nervous system a deep rest that you will not even get when you are sleeping. So in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. So my response could have been, okay, I pack my bags and go back. And I don't know where I would have landed, but I wouldn't have been here today. Then in terms of, if you look at this, the broader view of stepping out, what it means is that we're learning to see ourselves as a chessboard filled with possibilities. There's not just only one movement that can be done, if you know about chess, but there are other possibilities, other strategies that you can look at on the chessboard. So that's the stepping out part of the movement. Then the next one is walking your why. So once we have uncluttered and calmed our mental processes, and then we create that space where creativity comes, and then we create the space between the thoughts and the thinker, okay? And then we begin to focus on what we are really all about. Then it's about our core values. Then it's about what are our important goals. And for me, when I moved to Singapore, I never thought that I was going to make this my home. It was not just about having a successful career. For me, it was my personal development. I wanted to grow as a person. I wanted to learn, and I wanted to go back and serve in my own place. So those were my goals. And if I were to just pack my bags and go back because I was so scared to deal with the failure, with the shame, I don't think I would have been here today. So it's the knowing your why, walking with the why is about recognizing and accepting and distancing ourselves from that scary or painful or disruptive emotional stuff, and look at it more of that take the long view kind of approach, so that we can integrate our thinking and feeling with the long-term values and aspirations that can help us to find new and better ways of getting there. So our emotions, our core values, core, we know, again, in movement, we're all talking about our core. It provides the compass that keeps us moving in the right direction. Finally, it's about moving on. So you have face your challenges, you have decluttered, you know your why, then we need to just move on. We make some tiny tweaks here and there. And in my case, those kind of tweaks were like, okay, I'm going to spend, I think, a bit more time with my friends in the church, or I'm just going to take a few days off from work, because I never took off from work as well. And on weekends, I was just sleeping because I never slept the whole week, trying to impress my boss, would just tear my papers out. So yeah, making some tweaks. And if you need to make tweaks with habits, we need to make some tweaks with our habits. And the next point is the seesaw principle. If we need to, in the seesaw, you need to balance. And if a gymnast, is making all the difficult movements effortless through her agility, it's because of the well-developed muscles of her core. Yeah, and what does that mean for us? So we need to then balance between the challenge and the competence. So we are neither complacent, as I shared in the beginning, in my previous job before I moved to Singapore, maybe I was getting a bit more complacent, but at the same time, we are not overwhelmed. What I was facing in my Singapore, my first job, was just being overwhelmed. Yeah. So then we can be excited, we can be enthusiastic, and yeah, with all the invigorated and invigorated by the challenges. Final word on this gaining the emotional agility in terms of the essential movement. One example is there was this businesswoman, Sarah Blake Lee, and she was the founder of Spanx, the shapewear. So at one point, I think she was one of the youngest self-made female billionaire. So she described how at her dinner table, her father would ask them, apparently, tell me how you failed today. Okay, not what did you achieve? No, how you failed today. And that question was designed not to discourage them or demoralize them, but instead to push their limits and also to let them know that it's okay and even admirable to stumble and fail when you try something new and difficult. So in my case, it was I came to a new country. I know nobody. Everything is not familiar. Everything is not comfortable for me. Everything is discomfort. Then I have to go through this with my boss. But that failure was needed for me, so that I can meet head on and make my emotions flexible, so that I'm not going to run away from it, not ignore it, but face them head on and deal with it. So the ultimate goal of emotional agility is to keep a sense of challenge and growth alive alive and well throughout our life. Wow. Sorry, too long, but I wanted to share this 4 key elements of movements for emotional agility.
Wow, that was really good, Dora. So just for the benefit of everyone, the 4 points are about showing up, right?
Yes.
Stepping out, knowing your why, and the last one is about moving on. Right? And moving on and introducing the balance, the seesaw, and the challenge in your life, right?
Making tweaks with our habits.
Yeah. Great. So I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat, and they are all resonating with your stories. And maybe we'll come back to the comments, ladies, and you can please put in questions, because soon after this, we're going to have Q&A. But let me come back to Claire. Claire, can you share with us how courage was the defining factor in your situation? What are the lessons for us here, mortal souls, to learn from the wisdom of you 2 women? Yeah, tell us.
Thank you, Suman. First, I have to say, having courage is not the absence of fear. As I was choosing to make the decision that I chose to make, it's not that I was not aware of the probable challenges that awaited me. Of course, like I had mentioned already, there'd be the financial component of it. Already there's the therapist that you're paying. And then, of course, you've also taken a back end in relation to the big salary you were getting. So it's not that I was not afraid. The fear was there. But then I was making a choice, because the question was either I choose to pursue this career and leave someone to take care of what I hold so precious, or I serve what I hold precious and let the career take a back seat. And that's really what I chose. And I chose to have the courage that despite the probable challenges that would be ahead, I would just be courageous and move forward. And when I talk about courage, I actually look at it as an acronym. C stands for choosing, a choice. Okay. O stands for openness. Then U stands for us, or if you're alone, yourself. A stands for anchoring. Okay. R stands for realistic. Okay. A stands for ability. G stands for growth. And E stands for ethics. And usually I just say, you remember the U, I bring it to us or I am choosing openness and anchoring it in what matters while being realistic about my ability and allowing for growth and remaining true to my ethics. What I mean by that is I choose to be open to a new world that I was not aware of. But I anchored it on the fact that I loved my daughter so much and there's no one else who would love her like I did. But I still needed to be realistic about my ability, and I also needed to be realistic about her ability. But I was open to the growth that would emerge for her and the growth that would also emerge for myself. But above all, I needed to remain true to my ethics. And so what happened is I let go and I let love. In this case, I usually say I let love. And I found me. What I mean by that is, even without words, she got me to the place where I found passion. Yes, when I had a big job, big titles, all the respect in the world, I still wasn't excited to wake up very early in the morning. I still wasn't excited to help somebody and not even ask for a fee. But now I have the passion that if someone wants to meet with me 3 a.m. in the night, I am there. And if somebody, needs an IEP, they don't need to pay for it. So I am happy and passionate about it because when I let go and I let love, I found a way. That's how courage has been has been a defining factor for me. I know there is that bit. I will just copy paste it later when, as people are asking the Q&A, I will just write that sentence. Okay.
Thank you for that, Claire. Well, I wrote it down. I'm not sure if it's all right, but let me just read it for the benefit of those of you who are really looking for the words that Claire used, all that wisdom. So C is for choosing, O is for openness, U is for us, A is for anchoring, R is for realistic, A is for ability, G is for growth, and E is for ethics. So remember that. Ooh, so much wisdom in this room. Amazing. So any last words from the two of you? I'm going to open the floor now for Q&A, Dora, and let's see the comments and questions coming in. But before we open the floor, is there anything else you'd like to sort of say, Dora and Claire?
Claire, do you want to go first? Do you want to do the closing remarks? Or we want to take the Q&A first?
I think we can just take the Q&A first and then we can close.
Has anything to
Okay,
say?
questions, everybody. The floor is open for questions, So I'll just read a few of the comments. Deborah is saying, I also encountered the same. I think she's talking about your story, Deborah. I burned out and my body gave up before my head, and I left my senior leadership role, right? Thank you for sharing. It resonates with me. Kit Ping is saying, beautiful story, so touching and inspiring. Irene is saying, wow, heart-touching, transforming pain to purpose. That must be for you, Claire. Winnie is going on with, I'm experiencing a similar situation as Claire. It's really like walking through darkness, especially when minimal has changed, even though you give up your career progress. I hope I can accept my child as you did. Wow. So you have a supporter in here, Winnie. You can always reach out to Claire. I'm sure she'll be here with you. And then the rest are the comments on the points that the two of you have made. Are there any questions? So a lot of people thanking everyone, saying it's a wonderful webinar. So why don't we hear the wrap up from the two of you? And if Dora allows us, we can all come onto the panel and just have a chat after this. Yeah. Dora.
I'm just figuring out first how to let everyone in the panel. Can one of you do that? Because I think you have access to that too.
If you give me host rights, maybe I'll do that while the two of you can do some wrap up comments. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that, right? So yeah, Claire, go ahead first.
All right. I just really want to encourage everyone that at some moment in time, you really are going to get to a place where you will have to make that decision in your life, that decision about something. Sometimes it's professionally, sometimes it's affecting your family. But what I would encourage people is do it afraid. So long as you remain true, so long as you're looking at your ability, just have that openness and do it afraid. Change will happen and a lot of amazing things will just happen. You know, I find it so interesting. It's like God all along had been, aligning me for this moment. And if I had not just allowed myself to, just let it flow, I would not be receiving the form of blessing that I'm getting now. Because remember, I started a doctorate, which then rendered me to get online lecturing opportunity. And then so I'm able to work from home. I mean, that had to be God. And then more so, I have continued working from home. COVID happened. I know everybody's always feeling bad about it, but the positive that happened to me is working from home became such a norm that when I say I work from home, people don't just look at you like a loser. They're like, wow, you work from home. So, when you just let go and let God, amazing things happen. So I'm just telling people, just be open. Yeah, that's my parting shot.
Thank you, Claire. That's really beautiful. Dora, over to you for the final round. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire, and thank you for sharing that line that courage is not the absence of fear. Actually, I'm going to take that as part of my closing remarks because I had jotted that down also for myself. Yeah, so fear is not the absence. Courage is not the absence of fear, but it's meeting fear head on. And emotionally agile people, they demonstrate flexibility, but that doesn't mean that they are not experiencing feelings of anger or a sadness, because we all have challenging emotions. They are part of our agreement with life, they're part of a contract with life, but it's about facing them with curiosity, with self-compassion and acceptance. And in other words, it's by choosing courage. So instead of letting those feelings, derail us, or derail those emotionally agile people, they connect to the core. So, knowing your core values, when you know that, why am I here? What's my purpose? That is going to stabilize you, and then go and get all your desired goals and your dreams. Okay, so also I just want to reiterate Viktor Frankl's lines that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies growth and freedom. Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for hosting this session for us. You did so wonderful, and you asked such great questions. And thank you, everyone, for your encouragement. And then, I know most of you said you resonate with us. If you want to have a chat after this, we're happy, or we can, are we opening it up? We still have time. I think we can.
I think we're good. I mean, there's lots of thank yous coming through, loving the courage inside not only brings beauty inside, but also outside, impacting others. We also heard about acceptance, and of course, God plays a role in everything that we do. So we are actually come to the end of the session. It's time, but if some of you want to come on video, say the last few words, you're most welcome to do so. Otherwise, another big thank you to all of you for making the time. And remember, we need to stand for women in this International Women's Day. Looking forward to everyone supporting everyone. Yeah, thank you.
So no questions, or we are just closing it?
Thank you for a wonderful session. I would just like to just get a word. I think Dola, I love the caption you mentioned, between stimulus and what's it? There's a space. I'm missing that. Response. Okay, I think that's fantastic. Thank you. Many thanks to you and Claire, and also Suman. Great facilitation. Really enjoy. Great stuff.
Thank you.
She did. Yeah.
I just want to say a few words. I don't have really a questions, but I think I'm not really concerned, but something I noticed among my friends, that some of my friends at the 40s start to think about choosing careers or choosing their children. And nowadays, when the COVID pandemic visit us, all the mindsets start to change. And they start to think more about how to take care of the children, how to spend more time with them instead of spend time with the career and position and all the things that used to be meaning so much for them. So I think if this session, and we can do something with a clear message to encourage for people to take the courage to make this decision like Claire did, then that will be very good for the community. Yeah, that's just nice.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, if we were to look at it from the emotional agility standpoint, that the movement there that I am hearing is knowing your why. Because if they know their core values, and just like Claire also shared, she knew what her values were, what were more important to her, and then she zoomed into that and she plucked courage to be with her daughter instead of her high-flying corporate life. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, we're going to play the final song, not the final, the song that we played earlier. I love it. We are all going to move a little bit, okay? Remember, we talk about flexibility, movement. We're going to continue with that. And this is for each one of you. Happy Women's Day. And we may be broken, but we are beautiful.
And ask for something free. I got pride I could roll out for miles in front of
me. Move a little bit. Let's be flexible.
And I don't need sympathy.
Spread your arms. Spread your fingers, and stretch it up.
I'm superwoman. I know I'm strong. I know I got this because I've had it all along. I'm phenomenal, and I'm enough. I don't need you to tell me who to be. Give got this cause I've had it all along. I'm phenomenal, I'm enough. I don't need you to tell me who to be. Can someone just hold me? Don't fix me. Don't try to change me.